see it. There's two people watching it.
Awesome. I think that's just you and me.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wait a bit. I think we were a little bit late because of setup issues.
Wait a second. I think I hear myself 4 times.
Twice is the recommended number of times you should be hearing yourself.
That's 2 people watching us.
Anyone's watching this, can they add something to the comments? Soumya. Hey, Soumya.
Soumya is here. Hi, Soumya. Oh, there's one more person. Hey, Vinay. How are you doing?
Oh, hey, Vinay. How's it going, man? Any questions for the startup ecosystem? We're just waiting for some audience to trickle in. Monica as well.
It's weird. It doesn't show us how many people are watching the event.
All right, to just get this started, we wanted to keep this a very free-form, casual conversation. So we're happy to field any questions. In general, just to introduce ourselves, Prashant and I both work at Elenox. I'll let Prashant introduce himself first.
Hey, this is Prashant. I'm the CEO of Elenox. I'm good. It's weird. It's weird. It's a bit weird because I see 2 different streams, so it's acting a little weird.
There's a little bit of a delay for sure. Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah. By the way, guys, this is the first time we're doing this, so there's going to be a little bit of hiccups here and there.
Yeah, consider this a trial run, but we're super excited to be live. We've had a lot of people reach out and ask us questions on DMs and Twitter and all of that, so we thought it'd be best to have one organized place where we can start answering these questions. Oh, hey, Siddharth, good to see you here as well. So let's just start with a very general question, Prashant. One thing that people are asking these days is what is the state or the halat of the startup ecosystem in India, especially given the recent recession and the fears?
So our ecosystem is so broken and it's weird. There's 2 parts to it. One is already funded startups, and then the startups that are looking for new funding. Already funded startups have a slightly better chance of getting more funds, given how bad the funding scenarios are outside. VCs have cut down on their total funding because they are showcasing losses for the first time ever, as a lot of y'all must have heard. And early stage startups have a very, very tough time raising capital. Unless they're in the AI space, and that also I hear is going to get hit very hard pretty soon. Even AI space companies. The biggest reason is your customers that are going to be either B2B or B2C are cutting down on their spendings. Once people cut down on their spendings, it just trickles down. Even big companies like Apple have cut down on their spendings. So just having that, the big guys, biggest players in the market cutting down on their spending affects pretty much everyone because it just trickles down from top.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's kind of a snowball effect where if you have funding, you're going to keep getting funding. But if you don't have any yet, you're pretty much left out to dry.
Yeah, and also you should be ready for a down round. That's another thing. You can't expect the same valuations that you were seeing in 2019, 2020, 2021.
That was a different time.
Yeah, because again, pretty much everyone looks at, your interest rates, your risk-free interest rate has gone up. So that changes the overall valuation of every company that is out there. People who are not willing to accept this down round are going to struggle a lot more. If you ask me, it's better to take the money with a down round than to just fight for up round when in reality you're not making any money. That's pretty much my take here.
Makes sense. But to look at the bright side of things, a lot of people have been talking about the companies that came out of the last big recession, like Uber and Airbnb. what are startups supposed to do? What are these gritty, ambitious young founders supposed to do for the next couple of years?
I think the biggest thing is leverage tools that are available to you, like cut down on your spending, spend smartly. I mean, don't, like, for example, you don't have to do everything from scratch. You can always spend a little bit of your own money to do things that are already and use things that are already available, and then build your product, improve your product. That is one thing people should be doing now. Hiring is tough because everyone knows what the salaries of most people in tech space have been in the last 2 years. Uh, I mean, we are struggling to hire, to be honest. Like, you know what kind of salaries we are looking at. People are, the 2 years of experience are asking 60 lakh per annum, which is, I don't know, maybe it makes sense in some cases if you're working on algorithms that are mind blowing in AI space, or like in security research and things like that, and you have a lot of patents on your name and you have a lot of experience doing these stuff. But if you're a typical JavaScript, MERN stack web developer, and you have some experience, but you got paid for like 60 lakh or 40 lakh last time, and now you're expecting for another 20% bump up within 2 years, with like looking at 60 lakh pay package, that's going to be hard.
Where do you see salaries going through the recession? Do you see like salaries continuing to climb the way they've been doing, or
No, I think there is going to be a adjust to the mean. That's what I expect, and founders should be willing to give up some equity to these people and bring them in, saying that by putting in, you know, your salary is sorry, your equity is another part of the salary that also can go in. It can also provide value to these founders and early stage engineers. So leveraging your equity is going to be very important, and you should be open to giving up more equity than what you generally assume would want to give up, because at the end of the day, if it becomes big, you still own a major chunk of the pie. But if it doesn't, then you own a major chunk of the pie of nothing.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people are scared to give up equity. The moment you talk about equity, the moment you talk about diluting yourself as a founder, you're scared that you might lose the say you have. But those are very rare cases. I mean, they do happen, but those are only problems that you'll have when you're very successful.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you're very successful, all these things don't matter. Yeah, those are good problems to have. At that point, you might think, oh, I should not have diluted, but then you wouldn't have been in that place if you did not dilute, right?
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. It's always a very important thing to realize that your equity is a strong tool and can become a very good motivator to some of the early engineers.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've talked about before and we've seen generally in the ecosystem is that equity is worth much less in India, or is trusted less in India than it is in other places like the US. How can a founder essentially build trust for their equity? Like, how can a founder sell others on their equity?
It's about selling a dream again. The biggest problem here is people are seeing these huge salaries on the other side of the pool, or the pond. They see these huge salaries, which are like, someone whom you think can be your founding engineer will obviously be getting paid a lot. Like, if you think he's a founding engineer who has capabilities to take you off ground and build your whole product, it is going to be super important to understand that they have huge expectations. So it's all about finding passionate people rather than uh, finding engineers for the sake of it. And it's very hard to find passionate people in our networks. Like, there is no easy way of finding passionate co-founders who are purely into tech, and they'll just drop off like as soon as they get a good offer from some companies. The reason why equity is valued more in US is because people understand that they can always go out and make money. Like, if this doesn't work out, this can be a 1-year experiment, and they can always take equity as this thing, and if it as a surety that things might work out, and then you put in all the effort. And if it doesn't, you can take that experience and showcase that experience and always get a better job than what you would have gotten without that experience. But here, there is very little value for failure. right? Like uh, people don't believe that people should fail. They don't understand that people can fail, and they think failure is a very bad thing to have on your resume.
That makes a lot of sense. And I also have noticed in the last couple of years that there is a very specific mindset of person that is needed in early stage startups. You have a certain type of person that's amazing at creating systems, and another type that's great at optimizing systems, right? And I think the people who optimize systems are best at Microsoft and Meta and Fang. But you need a certain type of person who can imagine a system from scratch and implement that system in your startup. And without that, no startup will run. So I think there's a huge part to the mindset that's needed
Yes.
for everyone.
I mean, the biggest missing piece is vision and ability to convert that vision into a very quick prototype, right? And without that prototype or without that initial hours to build that, it's almost impossible to have anything go forward, right? A lot of people that you see who are coming from bigger companies are going to have a lot of organizational structure around them, which helps them build things easily. Like they have, like, specifically talking about engineering teams here, tech teams here. We can always go back to sales and marketing also in the same sense, but mainly for tech teams, the biggest problem is these people already have systems that are predefined for them. They are working in very small constraint on a very small constraint problem that had all the boilerplate that is ever needed around it, right? They have infrastructure, CI/CD systems. They have all the previous libraries that had to be used. They have deployment pipelines. They have tests already written. So if they make a mistake, it's already taken care of, or it can get caught very soon, and they just need to work on that one thing, and they have to optimize on that one small thing. But the moment they step out of that place and then you put them in this wide open playground, it's very hard for them to build their first block. Like they don't understand where to start from. They think everything is super important and they don't have all the infrastructure around them. So they get lost. So that particular mindset is missing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
If anyone has any questions about these in the audience.
Yeah, I've been scanning for questions. Folks, if you're watching, feel free to add any questions in the LinkedIn comments. We'd be happy to answer them. But I think there's one important question that we touched on, Prashant, when we mentioned prototypes, right? And people being used to these large systems. One very common issue that we come across is a lot of founders who think that the best way to build an MVP is to spend 6 months just, building an app and just keeping on adding features until you feel it's perfect and then putting it out to the audience. And I know we talk a lot about building lean and building very simply, but I think for a lot of people, that's very hard to imagine, because for a lot of people, they just can imagine apps because, when you look around you, you just see very completed, very beautiful apps.
Exactly.
So why don't you give us a perspective on what it is to actually build a real lean MVP?
It's a very hard thing, Even we have the same problem, right, Ankur? Even you and I, when we try to build something, we end up adding features here and there. We're like, this will take like a couple of days. This will take 3 days. This will take 1 day. It's fine. We can do it. It's an easy feature. It's a very good value add. But then in reality, what happens is you're just feature overloaded. Most of the times, MVPs or your test benches, like there are two pieces, right? Like this is people keep forgetting that MVPs are not the things that you sell to the customers, but other things through which you can get feedback on, right? MVP is not the thing that you're selling. It's the thing that helps you get feedback on your idea.
Yeah.
So the moment people don't understand that, like a lot of people don't understand that. They think MVP is this final initial version V1. Like they think MVP is V1 of their product. For example, if you're building any platform or any app, the easiest way is to just do Excel for it. Like 95% of the things are solved through Excel. Or if you're thinking it's too much, then just go ahead and use some no-code tools. Obviously, there are a lot of them. There's like Airtable. There's like a bunch of tooling around Airtable. There's Zapier. There is if this, then that. So you can use all these in combination, build a very simple static web page or a slightly dynamic web page using Webflow or something like that. And you can always, test out your thesis. You should test out your thesis. And you should keep testing it out. A lot of people think, oh, I got some feedback, it is done. But you should test out multiple theses. And we also struggle at this. You and I, we struggle at this too. It doesn't come naturally. It feels very not natural, very unnatural. It's like a very hard thing to do. And we need to keep poking ourselves back into, hey, this is an MVP. Hey, this is an MVP. You need to have that continuous structure of pushing yourself back into thinking that this is a very simple MVP. Else you get stuck in this, let me build this huge product. Okay, I have this feature, let me add this one feature, because our brains love features, right? You always think about, so I was looking at this one, recently I came across this one article, I believe. It was talking about, don't think about what you want to add, think about what you want to remove to make it easier for the customer. Like, a lot of people keep thinking that you should keep adding new features to do things for people. But in reality, maybe it's just as good. It's just that something very interesting is missing. There was this Canadian, custom sofa manufacturer. They could literally let you cut. I think it's Canadian, but they could literally let you customize the whole sofa however you want. And people loved it. People put it in their own space and they tried it out using virtual views. And people went all the way to checkout, and then they used to just drop off. The engagement on the platform was really good, but people used to drop off. And then they came into this question: what is wrong? What is missing in this process? If it was you and me, we would have been like, okay, let me give a discount. Let me add another feature. Let me do something else so that I can convert these people. So they started talking to their customers. And the customers basically said, or they understood, they realized the customers already had sofas in their place and they didn't know what to do with it. And unless they know what to do with it, how to get rid of it, pick it up. Because a lot of people, they do not have a huge truck. They do not have good services in their cities that can dispose these. In the US, you know how it is. They need you have designated times and places where you can dump these. You need to have someone come and pick it up for you. So this is a problem that they realized. And that was basically a psychological thing for people, and they weren't going forward with the sale purchase. So what they did was, at the moment we deliver it, we'll also pick it up from you for this much amount of money. And then their sales shot through the roof. So this is basically not about features, it's about understanding your customer, like basically talking about your customers and doing these stuff. And that was an example where it was like, you don't need to add features, you just need to listen. You just need to know what is missing, or why are they not even doing this. Like, adding new features would have been horrible for them, right? They would have still spent a lot of money on adding features onto their web app or whatever app that was, on customizing and letting people customize it. But then at the end of the day, they're just still not going to have more sales because, they didn't know the exact reason. So that's one thing that is important, talking to your customers, understanding it, and taking feedback on why they wouldn't pay for their product. Like, if you made this into a product, why would someone not pay for it? For that question, like having something along these lines, like having a feedback loop, having these very lean MVPs and feedback sessions with your customers.
I also think a lot of people find safety in features. If I add 20 features, maybe people will start using one, right? But I think the main problem, especially at the MVP stage, is you don't have a whole team of product managers working on each feature to make it good, right? So you have 20 really substandard features instead of one beautiful feature everybody uses. So even if you have to take 20 shots at bat, I think you should, progressively explore which one feature is the best. And then, that's called pivoting, but you keep pivoting between features until you find one feature. You don't just throw all the features in and start praying.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty important.
Have you seen any examples of MVPs or very early apps and you thought to yourself, wow, this is incredible, or this company is definitely going to succeed? Like, what's one company you've seen where they just iterated the best way?
I think Postman was an example.
Yeah.
The way they started off and how they set up their infrastructure around, that's a very simple concept. Like, think about this. Like, I have an API. I need to test the API. There's no platform for doing it. You had to write scripts to do this before. You need to write API running scripts on your own systems to run this. But Postman was like, nah, we'll just automate it for you first. I mean, we'll give you an open source tool or whatever and do this. And then they made it into a product where people didn't have to do anything else. Like it's a very simple question. It's a very simple question, and they found the answer to it. Like that was a very good product in that sense. Now, there are quite a few products that are out there that might make you feel yes, like it's very hard to find, or it's very rare that you are a customer for a very early stage startup. Unless you use it, you won't realize that it's very useful, right? Like you need to be there at ground zero, and it is very rare that you are there. And you can keep looking for products on Product Hunt, but how many products are you going to use on Product Hunt?
Yeah.
Right. It's very hard for you to be on the ground zero of a product and then think back on all the steps they've done. Right.
Makes sense. Yeah.
All the steps they had to go through to get there, because unless you've been through all the iterations, you don't know what their original MVP was. Right. For example, like Airbnb, if you look at Airbnb, they just scraped data from Craigslist and made it better for the first time. I mean, if you look at Craigslist, like pretty much all these apps are like extension of Craigslist in the US, and then they spread worldwide. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty important, and you need to understand the problem you're trying to solve in the, like, you need to understand what problem you're trying to solve first. You need to understand who your customer is. You need to see if there is a need for this solution.
Yeah.
After that, you can be like, okay, I can iterate on MVPs on solving this one very particular problem. Obviously, you're going to find new problems because you do not have domain expertise on everything. As you solve this one problem, you'll see more problems in the process, and you might think that's more lucrative and it's easier to solve. And then you find other competitors in the same space, and then you'll realize, okay, this makes sense, so let me just build this instead of this. So that's how your pivoting comes in. It's not, pivoting is not just throwing everything away. It is more in the lines of learning and changing your direction.
Yeah. And just to add to that, coming back to the previous point of building your simplest possible product, I think it's important to say this. I've met a lot of people who want to build the best version of a product because they think that's the version that people will use. So, for example, I once met a founder who was building a sports betting app. And I said, are people going to use this? And he's like, yeah. Then I'm like, why don't you just test this out? You just create a WhatsApp group, create your own bets, and, have an Excel sheet to track who's bet on what. And then, pay them out and see if people like it. And his point was essentially that without a lot of fancy graphics and gamification that you get in the app, people won't be willing to use it. And I think that's a very common misconception where if people aren't willing to use the base version of your product, then they're not going to use the fancy version of your product. For a lot of use cases, it's all or nothing. If people want to have fun, they can have fun with Microsoft Excel and a WhatsApp group, and no amount of gamification is going to increase that. Of course, you can pump up retention and you can pump up engagement with all of those gamification models that games use, but your base feature has to be fun by itself without all the bells and whistles and little things.
I mean, we call it the core transaction, right?
Yeah,
the core transaction is a core transaction.
I should write an article about that at some point.
If your core transaction is not adding any value, it doesn't matter how many bells and whistles you add, it won't make a difference. See, everyone wants to just go from like if it's a P2C app, they just want to have 100,000 users on like the end of first month. They just want to release it and just get it viral. They want to have all these features, but that's not how it works. First, you have to have hundreds of users testing it, and then you get feedback. These are your core users. See why they're staying back. Yeah. And then you start building for them and then building around them. See, if someone would use your platform for what it is at its initial stage, those are your power users. Those are your, alpha testers. Those are your core audience. You can't just shotgun it.
Yeah.
Like you can't, with features, you can, people think by adding more features, you can shotgun it, but you can't really do that.
Yeah. I think that's actually a really interesting question you bring up. We've seen, especially in India, a lot of folks here are great at builders. We have amazing developers with incredible ideas, and we see people building them also. But one thing that a lot of folks fall short on is marketing, getting your initial user, understanding, like literally in our tech server, I see questions every week. Hey, I've built this product, nobody's using it. What do I do? And then I ask them, what's your core customer? And they say people between 21 and 35. And I'm like, yeah, that's 60% of your population right there. Let's narrow it down. So I think one important thing for a lot of these builders, these techies to understand is how do you find your core audience? When you're converting from just a fun project to a startup, you really need to find that power user. So how do you find that power user?
So I think interesting thing is I would love to compare this with the US, right? Like I like one interesting thing in the US is people are willing to experiment, right? That's one piece, and the other piece is you have a lot of local communities. Like if you're building in California, in San Francisco, or if you're building in New York, you have these huge groups of people who are willing to test out your product. Like you go to events where you pitch your product and people will actually download it and test it out. But here, there is no such communities. There are not many communities that would do this, and people don't understand that. You need to be a part of these. There are a lot of online communities now. You have to be a part of these communities. You have to listen to what they say. You have to basically convince them that you're not spamming. You're not just doing stupid stuff on their in their community. You're basically looking to solve a problem for that community, right? You need to be a member of that community. You need to become a part of the community to showcase that your solution is for that community. Like you should find your first group. Like every group, there is a community. There's no question asked, unless it's like very old people, and then you need to go to old age groups. You need to sell it in old age groups, right? Like you have to go there. That's how you sell it. You can't just sit on your computer and hope it sells. Like you have to do the legwork. You have to go meet people. You have to go down and sell it to the people by doing legwork. If you do not do legwork and say I'm not able to sell stuff, no one is using it, then you haven't done anything. Sales is not easy. I mean, we face it too. Like it's very hard to sell. We know it. Like the first product I worked on, the sales cycle was 6 months to a year. Like imagine 6 months to a year sales cycle where you have to sit hoping that they respond and then they accept it and their budget approvals are there. It was a B2B product, but it's a huge pain, right? And you should understand what the sales cycles are first. You need to understand what drives someone to buy your product over whatever is out there. If there is something that already replaces your product and is widely used, what is the cost of switching? No one was, fired for using Microsoft Excel. Like this is a very simple thing. Or no one was fired for using Salesforce over your CRM, right? No one was fired for using Jira over your project management tool, right? Now, no one is going to be fired for using something based on ChatGPT over some bootlegged AI solution that you came up with, right? That's what it comes down to. So it's very important for people to understand the cost of replacement, cost of switching over, right? Yeah. If you do not understand what the cost of switching over from their existing workflow is, you will never be able to sell anything.
And I think you're talking mostly about the B2B space, right? Where everybody already has a tool to do something, and most new tools are just increasing efficiency or carving out new domains, like how AI tools are now making it easy for the marketing manager to generate briefs or visuals.
Exactly. And in the B2C space, it's even harder because you need to be a part of the community, as I said.
Right.
Like for B2C, that's important. Knowing the community, knowing your core sellers, knowing the core transaction, making sure the core transaction is adding value to the customer is important. But when it comes to B2B space, it's about understanding what their existing workflows are, how your tool can sit in the existing workflow, whether you can modify stuff or add more things into their workflow without any friction is important. The more friction there is, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
Right? You need to make it so frictionless, so smooth, right? That it works well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen an interesting bias towards B2C companies, even in India, right? Just because B2C is much more publicly viewable. But as we know,
Siddharth has a question here.
that is a question. Oh, beautiful. Oh, yeah. Considering your experience in building Collab GPT, how do you envision the future of AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants? And what opportunities do startups have in this space to create transformative products? That's actually an excellent and very broad question. Prashant, do you want to tackle that?
I think it's a very, very broad question. The thing is, people are open to using new products right now, but the biggest challenge is how do you fight inbuilt tools that are being pushed into OSs, like uh, like Microsoft is pushing AI heavily into the OS itself, and Google is doing the same. Apple is going to do the same. So how do you fight these solutions? Like every tool that's out there, realize that they can simply use an API from someone like OpenAI. They can convert their existing tools into AI-friendly solutions, right? Like Notion has done this already. So it's very important to understand whether you want to be an AI solution provider, then you're in the middle of the curve on entering. But the interesting thing is there are so many changes happening that you will always find an opportunity to take things up. Like you can always be there and be like, okay, let me become the provider in this space by doing this one thing differently. When it comes to chatbots and virtual assistants, I think there is a lot in that space, but at the same time, how much are people willing to spend on these is important. There have been chatbot solution providers for a while now, and they are doing well now. There's like the renaissance of AI renaissance is happening right now. But it's very important to know where you stand with respect to what data you have, what's your core competency, what is that one thing where your data is going to provide you with an edge, right?
Yeah. I think
without data, that doesn't make nothing makes sense. Like if you don't have data to push forward a very specific tool, it's not going to be very useful.
Yeah, I think big companies today aren't going to pick up your small startup tools because they have AI embedded, as Prashant said, into everything. And so I think in order to approach the AI space, you need to either go very niche or very local and solve problems around you, right? For example, small businesses around you aren't using Google or Notion or ChatGPT, right? They're just trying to sell more stuff. And one very interesting way I've read to look at AI is that AI doesn't create anything new. It just allows you to do what you are already doing for much cheaper or much faster, right? AI can't create completely original art that nobody has thought of before. It can synthesize existing art into new art, or it can, it can read code and write new code that is very similar to the code it's already read. So it can create new products, but it can't be transformatively new, right? It just makes everything cheaper. And so an example of an AI product that I know somebody actually building out is this is computer vision, less AI chatbot, but more computer vision. I know somebody who's building out AI-powered cameras in greenhouses to essentially manage crop growth and make sure that the crops are growing at optimal rates, and then water the crops, use fertilizers, and make sure they're not getting ruined. And whenever you see something getting ruined, you go fix it by manual intervention. And so something like that is something that would help farmers across the country in India, but that Google and Notion and all can't do because it requires a lot of very manual, very specific field work, right? So either go very niche or very local and solve problems in your community, or solve problems for the people are having problems, right? Those problems aren't being solved by Notion and Google.
One other way they can use it is to improve your own productivity. Like you can build so much more with AI. You can always brainstorm, but I don't see it giving you something transformatively new for yourself. Like you have to use it for building content for yourself, easily doing stuff instead of having to run around and find people to do it. And you should use it more often. Like you should use it a lot more to build your own content stack, for example, for marketing, for emails, for like a lot of these things. You can always use the state like AI to do this. And it's very important for teams to use the latest. It's not always important to use the latest, but to understand how to improve your productivity. It is important to understand how to improve your productivity in the latest phase. That's important.
Yeah. And one good thing it's really good at is helping you resolve mental blocks in the spaces you're not proficient in. If you're proficient at something, ChatGPT can't help, right? But for example, I'm not a marketer. If I want marketing tips, I'm just going to go ask ChatGPT for marketing tips, and it'll generate a basis on which it's very easy to build on. So it helps you cover up gaps in your knowledge or proficiencies. And I think long term, so by the way, this is very long term, but I think very long term, AI assistants are going to become ubiquitous. Not the kinds of assistants you see today where you go to a website and you type in, hi, I need this product, and the AI fails to answer because it doesn't recognize the prompt. But I think assistants that are personal to each of us, I think are going to be a big thing. Not like Google Home, but something more universal that essentially is more proactive and also communicates back to us. But that's a whole different story. I'm fairly bullish on AI becoming extremely big in the near future.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Is there any other questions from the audience?
Let me take a look. I had some DMs recently.
Quite a few audience.
All right, while we wait for the audience to answer my questions, Prashant, I know you have some strong opinions on this. So, what are your thoughts on raising money versus getting to revenue? Especially in today's landscape, how do you see founders balancing that very short runway and that indecision and that financial insecurity with just raising some capital?
It's hard. It's hard to answer because it's all dependent on what product you're building, how much money is needed to take it to market, how much money is needed to build the products out, how much are your customers paying you for these things. All these matter, and unless you have a good understanding of all these things, it's hard to say whether someone should raise capital or not. Like if you're in a state where you have a product that you can sell and you're not able to sell because your marketing budget is not enough, then you'll have to go back to the slate and check what is the difference, right? Like you have to check uh, what is missing from your product. You might have to go back to the basics. But I believe bootstrapping generally solves this problem. I believe raising capital initially will constrain you to the original question that was asked during the what do you call raising capital. That's because that's how the investors are going to look at you, and you're going to have mounting pressures from the investors to cut down your spending on stuff that might be critical to pivot. Right? They will be like, you need to continue doing what you said you were doing, spend money, or just die. Right? As a company, these are your only options. So it's a gloomy thing, but it's hard to say no to money most of the time. But at the same time, it's very important for you as a founder to understand who you're getting in bed with.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, they get excited by the notion of capital coming in, so they don't fully analyze the circumstances. But it's important to find that balance between giving away power and growth and all of that. One thing that I think we're both interested in is how inequitable the VC scene is. Like, I'm just looking at a graph right now that shows VC capital investment in the first half of 2022. The San Francisco area received 52 billion worth of VC investment. And the second most was the New York area, which received only 19. And then everything else is even lower than that, right? And meanwhile, India, I'm not sure where it stands, but it's nowhere even close to that. So it's not
innovation. I think innovation does like San Francisco Bay Area. You've been there, I've been there. We know how innovation happens there. Like you know how right now, if you've seen this video by Signal, like NFX Capital, they've released a video about how the like you know that AI renaissance is happening, but you should be there to experience this. People don't understand the difference between the culture. I mean, you know it, I know it, but people don't understand the difference between culture and the process in which people work there versus here. Like people in the startup ecosystem, they just give up everything just to work on their startup. They're like, it's like a thing. There is a very different lifestyle, a very different thought process needed for that kind of work. And VCs love investing there because the talent is there. You can say, oh, India has talent, but India already has brain drain. Like 70 to 80% of the talent has already gone to that same exact places like Bay Area, Houston area, New York, Atlanta. These are the places where Indians are. All the smart Indians that people talk about, like all the IIT chip, like
right? The smart Indians who had the opportunity to get there. I think there's a
no,
lot
I
in
think
this.
yes, but at the same time, when I say smart in terms of these fields, smart in these fields, like if you're smart in these fields, you usually would have the opportunity to go there. And some people decide to stay back. Some people decide to come back. But most of them stay there. Most of them work for these huge companies. Most of them work for these early stage startups, and they find these as what do you call trampolines for their success, right? They just take off using those. I mean, if you look at any successful person, they must have worked in a startup or have some experience in the startup ecosystem there and have worked with VCs and stuff because they know they're smart. It's basically like New York area has a lot of money. That's the financial capital of the world. So there is that piece. And then there is the innovation capital of the world. That is San Francisco Bay Area. But then there is also like a lot of funding in China. But again, that's a very different kind of funding. We have some funding going on here in India, Bangalore, mainly Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Pune. But the ecosystem is not there. It is very like the thought process has to change. Thought process has to change.
Like, how do we change that?
By believing that we can grow together rather than I will grow at your cost. Like, do not fall for the basic things. Like, you're not gonna become a millionaire overnight. You are not gonna raise funds without putting in the effort. You need to go and pitch. You can't get introductions to investors and screw up. You can't, or you have the right connections. Like that's the last piece. But the most important thing is it's not more and more bootstrappers, more and more people who are willing to get their hands dirty and spend their time doing this, and potentially building a better mentality among people that this is not a zero-sum game. It's an ever-growing piece of pie that we all can happily take and enjoy.
Yeah,
like that is the most important thing. People think it's a zero-sum game. Like and it's for me to make money, I need to screw someone over. That's not how this works. You're not screwing anyone over. You're actually working hard. You're actually building products. You're building things that people use. And just because you're in the same space doesn't mean you're competing either. That's also another thing. It's not like one or none. Right? Like obviously there are things where it can get to that thing, but you can still make a decent amount of money and build a very good ecosystem around yourself. That's important, and that's what we're trying to do with Elenox too.
Absolutely, yeah. When I came back to India, the first week was full of this beautiful chaos where there was opportunity everywhere, and I still see it, right? Like I needed to be out of the system to see the potential in the system, and I'm so glad I got that experience. So now I'm actually really excited about India because there's so much that is left to be built, and I see so many people who are hungry to build it. But I think on that note, I think it's a good time to call it a wrap. I'm not sure we'll get any more questions today, but super glad we got to do this.
Yeah, super happy that we did this, and like with all the people here, I mean, really thank you for being a part of this live stream.
Absolutely. Even if one person learned one thing here, our job is done, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Have a great day, folks.
I mean, let's ask for a final question and then call it a day then.
All right.
Any final questions? Feel free. We're not going to judge you all asking questions.
The stupidest questions are usually asked by the smartest people I've seen. The most
Yeah.
successful people I've ever met in my life never hesitate to ask the stupidest questions because they're curious.
Absolutely. Ask questions, keep questioning, keep learning. All right. I guess you can call it a wrap.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank
So-
you, everyone.
Have a great Thursday and a great weekend, folks.